Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Welcome to each and every one of you. This is a special edition live stream in conjunction with Social Intifada and the Unapologetic Muslim, as well as the Palestine Information Network. Special edition with the recent Global March to Gaza that has taken place. And tonight we'll be speaking to a few important voices. Gaza has been under a severe Israeli-imposed blockade since the start of March. No food, medical supplies, or aid have been allowed in despite the growing calls by the international community, including some of Israel's allies, against this intentionally induced starvation of the people of Gaza by the apartheid Zionist entity. The genocidal war machine has gone after and banned the United Nations, UNRWA, and the World Food Programme from operating in Gaza. Recently, an Israeli initiated operation under the cover of the propaganda named Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and managed on the ground by United States mercenaries in a complete affront to any basic human dignity, have set up areas resembling concentration camps that would make Nazis look like schoolboys. In scenes straight out of the Hunger Games movie, Palestinians are herded in order to scramble for food, and then they are shot at, with reports of fatalities emerging every single day. All this is on top of a 19-month-long ongoing barbaric genocide of Gaza, by Israeli savages that has resulted in the murder and injuries of more than 100,000 Palestinians, with at least half consisting of children, including babies. As governments have been unable, or in many cases unwilling, to hold Israel to account, the calls of global citizens has been growing louder. With the aim of attempting to break the siege to allow aid into Gaza, people have been rallying to coordinate their efforts from all parts of the world. Last week, more than 4,000 people of all faiths, ethnicities, and backgrounds from 80 countries converged on Egypt, heeding the Global March to Gaza, a call to march to Gaza in an attempt to break the siege and blockade of the Gaza Strip. Israeli war criminals issued a call to Egypt to stop the march. Needless to say, the Egyptian authorities dutifully carried out this instruction. Activists were detained, had passports confiscated, were attacked by thugs, and some were deported. Everyone was prevented from reaching Rafah. Some of those 4,000 were from South Africa, and this evening we will be speaking to at least 5 or 6 of those who made the journey. Welcome to this live stream where we are going to get some perspectives and eyewitness accounts on the events that transpired in Egypt, as well as the more important siege and blockade of Gaza. Earlier on this afternoon, I did a short recording with 2 of our guests because they were unable to be on the live this evening. The first was with Bashira Suma, who I'm going to add on in a second. I'm joined by Bashira Suma. Bashira is a long-time activist for Palestine, and she was one of the South African activists and a country coordinator for the Global March to Gaza. And Bashira is joining us from Cape Town. Bashira, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam. Shukran for having me.
I'm sure it must have been a busy last 2 weeks, and then prior to that as well. Firstly, how did you initially hear about the Global March to Gaza, and what motivated you to join and to get involved?
So a comrade in the Netherlands, she's actually South African, but she lives in the Netherlands, and we connected over solidarity work last year. She informed me about it a couple of months ago. And as soon as I saw it, I knew it was something I wanted to do. At first, I didn't know if it was even real, because so many of us have been saying if we have the opportunity to try and go to Gaza or to march close by, we would jump at the opportunity. So as soon as I found out that it was a legitimate cause, I opted into it. What motivated me to go? I think with many people who have been watching the genocide for the past just under 2 years, and for many people who have been in the solidarity space for the liberation of Palestine and other oppressed nations, I think it just felt like we've been doing the same thing over and over for the past 2 years. And, we've been lobbying governments, we've been protesting, we've been boycotting, we've been doing everything in our power as citizens. And the governments and international institutions just haven't been taking it seriously and haven't been changing anything. And it just felt like, we can't rely on them any longer. And this is an opportunity for people to take matters into their own hands and take a stand and show governments and international institutions that, we are willing to do what we can, and we're willing to put ourselves on the line if it means that we can put all of this to an end.
Now, obviously, it's that comes from a sense of frustration in terms of calling on those in positions of power to be able to exercise their responsibility over people around the world who need it most. And I think every single person, every single activist or non-activist, everybody who's been watching the genocide unfold has had the same feeling of wanting to be able to do more. So this call came about. I think it started surfacing maybe a couple of months, probably after Ramadan, when I saw the first communications about this. And it was an ideal opportunity, of course, but I'm sure there was a lot that needed to be done in the background because you're swimming upstream here. You don't have the support of authorities and of government. So in terms of an organizational perspective, because you apologies for that. We seem to have hit an issue with the recording. I'll come back to that in a second. Always gremlins in the system. Hope it's not the Egyptians getting to us while we're talking about this. While we're getting that interview back with Bashira, unfortunately, I don't know what's going on there. We're going to get that interview back. Let me jump to the interview we did with Ferial Sakur, who also made the journey to Egypt, and she shared some of her experiences with me this afternoon. Following on from that, we've got a couple of guests who will be joining us on the live stream from various locations this evening. Joined now by Ferial Sakur. Ferial is a mum of 3 and an executive with a big corporate who actually took leave. She left her family, took leave to actively join the march to Gaza in Egypt. Ferial, assalamu alaikum and welcome to the live stream.
Wassalam. Thank you for having me, Khalid.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Ferial, what motivated you? You're busy with work. You've got a family to look after. You've got to leave all of these behind and go on a trip when you don't know how long that trip's actually going to be and what dangers await you. What motivated you to go, and how did you find out about the march, the global march?
What motivated me? I think, waking up daily to the atrocities that's occurring in Gaza and looking at, the footages and babies dying, mums do not have milk to feed their babies, the bombings, it's like there comes a time where you ask yourself, what can you do? Enough is enough. Can you pray, you give charity, but you feel so helpless that there's not much you can do. And I think for me, it was important when I looked at, obviously with all the algorithms and all my content that I keep watching on Gaza, the Global March to Gaza appeared on my feed. And that's when I noticed, like the Freedom Flotilla that was at sea, there was an opportunity, to be present at the Rafah border and to appeal to lift the siege. And that's when I registered. So that was kind of like where it all began.
Okay. Okay. And then in terms of preparations for the trip, I mean, contingencies, did you have any issues applying for a visa? I don't think South Africans require a visa, but perhaps there was additional permits that needed to be applied for. How did that process go?
So the process was, firstly, I would like to thank the Global March to Gaza Committee in SA. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude for the incredible effort and dedication they put in organizing the entire end-to-end process for us. As I said, I first clicked on a link and then I was led to call it a platform where it was on WhatsApp, Telegram, etc. From there, they guided me in terms of registering. There was a registration process. Along with the registration process, they briefed me on what needs to be completed and by what deadline. So I completed all the documentation. We had to get flights. It was an e-visa. We didn't really need it because we could just get into Egypt and get it there. But we just thought, for the entire process to run smoothly, it doesn't hurt to actually apply from here. So we got the visas whilst we were in SA, and we kind of liaised with one another and grouped ourselves so we could stay near each other for in Egypt. So we had pre-briefings. We had a full briefing actually before we left on what to expect in Cairo, the policies and the processes and the procedures of the country, what rules to abide by, what regulations we need to abide by. So yeah, there was advisors on the briefing session, there were lawyers. So we had a full end-to-end process before we left for Cairo. Most of us had to leave before the 13th and make it to Cairo, otherwise you would be struck off the list. So because it was a global march and we were representing SA along with 80 other countries that were going to be present at the time.
So fast forward now, you get to Egypt and you find out South Africans are detained. You're hearing probably that some of the people that are flying in from other countries have been arrested, some have been detained, some have had their passports taken away, some have actually been deported. What's going through your mind at this time?
So I think I wouldn't say fast forward because we were on kind of an early flight. So we didn't yet experience that. So we got onto the flight on the 11th and we got into Egypt on the 12th. And then when we were there, we arrived. Everything ran smoothly at the airport, like it was meant to. We were just coming in to represent SA in a global march. So we arrived early on the 12th and had to wait for our other delegates that were arriving on other flights and at different times. We were split up into different hotels. And I think in that period, I was so exhausted. I didn't hear much about anything until I kind of got to bed, woke up, and I then started seeing feeds from our group, our advisors and our coordinators to say some guys have been held back. So at that point, it started getting to me saying, okay, what's going on? Because I thought this global march is something that Egypt supports, and they claim to want to lift the siege in Gaza. They claim to want to ensure humanitarian aid gets to them. And then I'm all confused. Why are our delegates and other countries being detained? So that started working on me a bit. And then this is where it got a bit interesting. So after reading it, I thought, okay, let me head out. I've got a few hours before we regroup when all the delegates arrive. Let me go into the city and get some lunch or late lunch. And when I got to the reception, I was accosted by police officers in civilian, like looking like normal civilians, and along with 3 others. We were 4 going into the city, and they stopped us at reception and they said, please, can we have your passports and your phones? And I said, sorry, who are you? And then they,
That's the infamous Egyptian security services, yeah, in plain clothes. Yeah.
and then I was like, now, okay, what's going on? And then the reality hit me that, okay, it was my turn now. And then they said, after, like reading what was posted in the group, I was like, here's my phone. They went through my chat histories, a few apps, a gallery, and my passport, and asked me
Did
what
they
I
do
do.
all of that in your presence, or did they take your device away?
No, they did it in my presence.
Okay.
And then they gave it back to us, and we headed out for lunch, and we were okay. I think that was just before the 13th, and that's when we were heading to a meeting point, which was we all had to get into Ubers to get into on the 13th, along with whoever made it into Cairo. We had to, and obviously our advisors and lawyers were handling the detainees at, from the other groups, but we continued on our journey. So on the 13th, we headed towards Ismailia. And Ismailia is about 124 k's out of Cairo. And then we were planned to meet there. And from there, head towards Al Arish. And that's where we were going to march on foot to the Rafah crossing with the aim of lifting the siege and getting humanitarian aid into Gaza. And at the second checkpoint, that's when we were stopped. Our passports were all confiscated. I think many delegates was basically stopped at the second crossing. Some made it to the first and were stopped, but most of us were stopped at the second. And that's where I think it got a little bit more difficult for us in terms of, now we're stranded, we have no food, no water. Our passports were taken and we were not sure, what the outcome would be. And then we had Mandla Mandela, we had Molana Ali from the Ulama Council of South Africa, and we had some of our organizing committee members there that were busy liaising with them to understand why our passports are being confiscated. We did nothing wrong. They're making us feel like criminals. And here's a country it's an Arab country. They claim to want to support, the Palestinians, and we did nothing wrong. And why are we stopped at a toll gate? It's a checkpoint. And we were peaceful. We were in our cars. We were peaceful. There was no, march happening at the border or anything of that sort. So at the checkpoint, I mean. So we waited about 5 to 6 hours before I think they decided they wanted to come and address the South African team and each country individually. And that's where they gave us an ultimatum. They told us, you have 15 minutes, grab your belongings, and you will get into this bus and you will leave for Cairo. Otherwise, you will face serious consequences.
Okay. And then your
Yes.
decision, what was the decision thereafter?
They didn't leave us with much choice because there was police all around. They brought in military guys and they were forming in huge groups around us and surrounding us. So I kind of think, from our pre-briefing before we left, we had to plan for these scenarios in case of, because you in these countries. So we decided jointly as a team that for the safety of our delegates, it would be best that we conform to, their rules. So they then dropped us off at some unknown location in the middle of somewhere in Cairo, and they made us find our own way. And you must understand, we didn't have hotels, so we had to regroup, look for accommodation again, and then process what we've been through to then go.
Sure. Subhanallah. Beryl, has this, my last question to you before I let you go, has this experience deterred you in any way, or has this encouraged you to work even harder for the cause? Because ultimately the goal is to not just to get aid into Gaza, which is of critical importance right now, and to end the blockade and to end the genocide, but ultimately Palestine is under occupation. So where has this experience left you?
I think we will regroup when all the members are back home. Some are still in Cairo at the moment. They found ways of trying to assist the Palestinian refugees that are in Cairo, be it in hospitals or in with charitable organizations, which they didn't want their trip to be completely wasted. So they will, when they return, we'll have we'll remobilize and find new ways, I guess, in assisting to lift the siege in Gaza. It doesn't end here. Our commitment is to make sure that we get humanitarian aid into Gaza. And I think lastly for me, I want to encourage everyone, if you witnessed or experienced what we've been through in Egypt, I think you need to exert pressure to our government, as well as write letters to the Pan-African Parliament, the African Union regarding Egypt's, behavior towards us when they claim to actually want to support the cause. This was not the case. And I would encourage them to, hold them accountable. Government needs to hold Egypt accountable, and to also look at expelling them from these unions, because this was really a bad experience for most of us. We weren't expecting this, especially not from an Arab country.
And this is an indicator of, I suppose, the broader complicity of Egypt in the genocide, because we know what's contributing to the blockade in Gaza is the fact that 8 trucks have been stuck at the border for months on end now, more than 3,000 trucks. We did a report on that, and then we spoke about that at the Egyptian embassy when we had the protest there. So, Ferial, Jazakallah khair for your time. Really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you in more active work, and ultimately may Allah accept, because the ultimate goal is a noble one of everybody involved, and that is to help the people of Palestine liberate themselves from this ugly and brutal occupation. Jazakallah khair.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
So that was an important segment with our sister Ferial, reiterating the importance of people who obviously weren't able to visit. And there's a lot more that can be done from all of us, wherever we are. One of those ways that Ferial has impressed upon everybody is to ensure that we put pressure on the people in positions of authority wherever we are. And we do our level best in order to get all these Zionist-affiliated organizations banned, removed, until they renounce Zionism and they cut ties with the state. My next guest is coming in. He's coming in from Egypt, alhamdulillah. I'm going to jump straight to that. We've managed to recover the interview with Bashira, which we'll come back to shortly. I'd like to welcome our brother Harun Ori, who is speaking to us live from Cairo, I believe. Harun, salamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair for making the time. I can tell you outside somewhere, so that means the weather is better than what it is here in South Africa at the moment. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Harun, we've got you for a few minutes. I just want to understand from your perspective. We'll get to why you're still in Egypt now. These reports that came out, before we get there, initially when the preparation was taking place about the Global March to Gaza, how did you manage to come across the information, and how did you go about becoming a part of the South African contingent?
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yeah, shukran for the time and opportunity. I think the message was out, and social media was flooded with the opportunity to join the Global March to Gaza. And obviously we followed protocol, and we did what we needed to do in order to partake in this particular event, alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khair. So when you, I don't know which part of which South Africa, because there were a number of South Africans that had obviously flown to Egypt and taken various routes in order to get there. When you got to Egypt on arrival at Cairo airport, had you already heard about South Africans who were detained or who were held up, whose passports were taken away? Were they from your group, or did this happen afterwards?
No, we flew in from Cape Town into Cairo, but at least from Johannesburg, from Cape Town to Johannesburg and then into Cairo. But no information came through on any posts that we were informed. We're obviously informed to keep the radar as far as possible to get into Cairo. Unfortunately, we were 7 traveling together. The check, who made it through border passport control, and once trying to exit the airport, where they searched our luggage, which is probably just 1-2 steps, and we'll probably be on the soil of Egypt, we were asked to come back into the airport. And at that point, we were told we're not allowed to leave, and we were called back into the airport at that particular time.
So that was your particular traveling group that was held back. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were 7 people that were traveling together at that particular time, yes, from Cape Town, South Africa.
Okay, and did they give any reasons for holding you guys back or wanting you to come back into the airport?
So basically what happened, they searched our stuff, and just thereafter they then said, look, we need to turn back. Pulled us not into an office, but basically into the corridors of where many offices were. And we were then, one of us were then, they took all our phones and passports immediately from us. They then said we need to wait. They called one by one. In the first one that went in of our people was Zakaria, and they immediately told him, we're going to deport you. And that would apply for all of us. And then they called us one by one in, just to ask why we were there. We then obviously went back into the corridor, and at that particular time, they then immediately after that, they obviously detained us at the airport.
So, were there any reasons given for the initial? They wanted to deport everybody. Did they give any reasons, or did they just not mention anything?
Up until now, nothing. We've requested at the first encounter when they asked us to come back. We said, please give us an explanation what this is about. And as you know, the whole of Egypt is militarized. Nobody speaks, nobody talks. Unfortunately, no response at all. In the office, no response at all. While being detained or taken to the holding cells at the airport where they detained us, no response at all. And this was unfortunately the situation throughout that particular event, where we couldn't get any response from them at all.
And what was the duration that the group was held in detention at Cairo airport?
We landed in Cairo at about 2 a.m. the morning. We then obviously purchased some SIM cards at the airport after coming through, checking our passports, which we thought we were cleared to do, and then obviously purchased some SIM cards. They then only released at 2 o'clock the afternoon. So I would
12
account
hours.
easily probably from about 4 o'clock after disembarking the aircraft, going through passports X, Y, and Z. We probably at about 4 they detained us. So we're looking at about 8 hours
8 hours at the
of
airport.
being detained at the airport.
That's absolutely
And until today,
disgusting.
no explanation. It's we know what Egypt is about. We know
Mhm.
the land and the soil we're walking on, and obviously it's militarized. But I think we shouldn't be any more apologetic about what's happening in the world. It's countries like Egypt, and people say, what? Whilst you're here, you don't need mustn't speak against the government. We respect the people of Egypt, and some of the authorities are very. I would say this with a lot of respect towards them. They're not happy in the space they are in. They're not happy.
Okay.
But the authority itself and the government itself, I think it's time we should say the truth as it is. Egypt right now, and they don't like you to say this, but in what we're seeing under the authority of Sisi, that the Egyptians are just as complicit in what is happening to our brothers and sisters in Palestine. And a lot of people that were at the march and that were speaking to media, and I'm saying this with a lot of love and respect to each and everyone that was here. No disrespect to anybody, but I think we need to tell the people, the authority, that Egypt is. We can't sit around and say, what, they could have done that, they didn't do it. They could have done this, they didn't do it. The reality is, they have stopped us from marching to the Rafah border simply because we want the blockade to end. We want aid to go into Gaza. I mean, we're sitting now as we're speaking. I just stepped out of a discussion and a meeting. And yesterday we had the opportunity to meet with refugees, and we had the opportunity now this evening to meet with some group of teachers that started education system, because they apparently are not allowed into the Egyptian schools. They don't get education. They need to now establish their own type of schooling system for their children. And we had an encounter with him probably just an half an hour ago, and they giving their side of how, and they had to pay about $500 firstly, about a year, some 2 years, some 3 years to get into to Egypt. And the thing is, they're not allowed to partake in anything. And we're not speaking ordinary people. We're speaking, one guy is a psychologist, one lady is a doctor, the one lady is a lawyer, when they were currently living in Gaza. And the one description that hit me very hard right now was the fact that this woman said the scene in Gaza one night for her was like the end of time. That was the scene. It was raining bombs for 25 to 30 minutes. Raining bombs, she says. She says, they need to speak about it, but that's something that I ask myself. We go home, we're comfortable, but we don't want to speak of the reality of the complicity of the Egyptian government, because we want to come back to Egypt, because we're sending our children to educational institutions to become scholars in Egypt. I think we must start asking ourselves, it's by time that, these institutions, I'm almost sure those institutions has been, they've been captured, and the syllabus has been tampered with. Hence, we find there's so much disunity amongst our people today, and here we're referring to the Muslims. And the other thing that came out very strongly in this global march to Gaza was there was no discussion of color and creed. There was no discussion of racial barriers. There was no discussion of, are you a Sunni or you're Shi'i? Are you a Wahhabi or you're Salafi? There was no type of these discussions. We had one objective, and the objective was, we are here as humanitarians to ask the Egyptian government to open the Rafah border, to end the blockade, so people can have a sustainable meal so they can live another day. They can live to see another hour. Starvation, 1.2 million people are being starved in Gaza at this moment. We're saying how come the world is, being apologetic about countries that are complicit and not allowing aid into these countries.
Well, it tells us there's something seriously wrong with the world and the current world order as we know it, or as we've been told over many years. The international system, international law, humanitarian law, all of these things that were told to us, and all of these laws that were enacted post World War II, that have been preached to the world. It appears as though those apply selectively to a certain group of people and a certain group of states, and it excludes everybody else. Because where else in the world would you see something so lopsided, where you've got a genocide being live streamed every day, today, yesterday, while you guys have been in Egypt over the last week, trying to get aid, helping to break the siege to get aid into Gaza, bombs were dropping on Gaza and people were being massacred. So there's something seriously wrong with this so-called world order that we have. In line with your comment about the Egyptian authorities, I mean there's a lot. I mean that's an entirely separate discussion to have, because there's so much to unpack there. One of the interesting comments I came across, or the articles I came across, was people in key positions in the media, or prominent personalities within Egypt and Egyptian TV, came out and said that the protesters need to be stopped because their intentions are to shame Egypt and to drag Egypt into something and to defame Egypt, basically, because Egypt is doing so much, but these people are coming here with militant ideologies, etc., and they name-checked some of the organizations that are banned around the world, trying to allude to the fact and maybe tie this in straight out of the Zionist playbook, exactly straight out of the Zionist playbook. So these are people in key positions in Egypt, in the media, on TV, who do these types of things at the bidding of the Egyptian government.
Yeah, I think, Khalid, it's very clear that we need to control the narrative right now. We need to control the narrative to the world. And we need to make it very clear that, there was no protest. There was no gathering. They created the checkpoints to become overcrowded. And obviously, if you're going to stop 500 or 5,000 people at a checkpoint, it's going to seem as if it's a protest, because everybody's asked to get out of the vehicles. Taxi drivers were asked to leave the checkpoints. Obviously, you're creating the scene to control the narrative. And this is exactly what happened at one of the checkpoints in Cairo. And we're saying that it's time that the people on the ground need to control that narrative. People like yourself and media houses in South Africa, and those who are truthful to the cause of the oppressors, of the people that are being oppressed. It's time that we control the narrative, and we need to change that immediately, because exactly the scene was set. They create a backlog of traffic. They ask people to, they take people's passports. They then ask people to step out of the vehicles. They then ask taxi drivers to leave. Obviously, if you look at that scene, it looks like a protest. But obviously, people are, where do they go? In the middle of nowhere. I need my passport. You took it. So
that's exactly the footage that we were getting from so many activists over social media, especially what took place. I think it was at the second checkpoint. We were getting footage from so many different activists that was being sent out, and all from different angles. Literally, Egyptian security forces dragging people onto the buses.
Yes. I think what is worse, we had people that passed the third checkpoint. They were asked to come back. We had people into Ismailia. They made it through to the first meeting point. They were dragged out of hotel rooms at 3 a.m. in the morning. So are you going to say, well, they were protesting in the hotel room? 3 people, 2 people. So how do you explain dragging people out of the hotel rooms at 3 a.m. in the morning, forcing them into buses, physically hitting them into buses? That's what happened. Fortunately for 3 of our members, the delegation that traveled together of the Pagan movement, they went under the radar. They didn't track them for 2 days in that particular region, and we could have forwarded advanced our movement, but under instruction of the organizers, we felt it was better to pull them back to Cairo. But this was the reality. And how do you control that particular narrative where you went to remove people out of the hotels, whether it be in other countries, that's all irrelevant. You went to people's hotels and you physically removed them. That doesn't paint a picture of a protest. That paints a picture of harassment. That paints a picture of dictatorship. That paints a picture of forcefully removing people out of a country where you have and where they've given us the right to enter the country. Firstly, we didn't come into this country. We requested permission to enter into this country by applying for our visas. Whether they say you don't require a visa, we did the process, and now telling us you're not welcome here. We need to get the narrative right, and we need to tell the world exactly what has happened over this last few weeks, over the last week in Cairo.
Quite a bit of work to do, and ultimately, obviously, with the aim of helping the people of Palestine. That's the ultimate aim here. Harun, before I let you go, just very briefly, a message to the viewers of how the viewers, people watching the stream, people watching the video tomorrow or whenever, how they can help. What can people do to help?
I think, Khalid, the time of speaking about a free Palestine needs to become a reality in our lives. We visited a hospital where a guy, or physically we could see the wounds on his body from a bomb that hit his home and killed 4 children and his wife. To say something, to boycott is something, but to physically try and do something is completely on another level. And here we're not saying people are not doing enough. Here we're saying we can do more. Here we're saying we can put pressure on our government to start. People might say I'm harsh, but we need to start cutting ties with countries like Egypt that is complicit in the particular genocide. We need to start recalling our ambassadors that are here and saying, you know what, if this is your behavior towards an oppression, a genocide that is happening, starvation that is happening. I mean, we have the UN Charter, we have enough international laws that protects our citizens and the people of Palestine from starvation. We have enough laws that says we have to get aid in. We have to send a response team. Why is our government and all the other governments not responding on the basis of international law? We're saying to our people from Cairo, from Egypt, and we're hoping to depart over this weekend, inshallah, back home. But we're saying to our people, the time for marching only and shouting free Palestine needs to be escalated to another level. We are faced with the enemy in our own country. Our government needs to step up, and they need to take action against those that are occupying our lands in South Africa after serving in the IDF, going back to South Africa, and they think they can have a free reign. It's time that our people respond in a justified way. It's time that our people respond in a way which the Palestinians are using to defend themselves, and that is to defend ourselves and have the right to defend life, because life in the sight of the Almighty is sacred, and the Palestinians' fight is a justified fight. So, and Allah speaks to us very clear in His Quran, and we know there are various different views on this, but Allah says, and wherever you find them, you must slay them. We can discuss it on another time with scholars, but I think the Quran is very clear as to what to do with the enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's only time that we need to activate ourselves more. We need to become more proactive, and we need to do more. And I think next time we want to come to Egypt, we must march literally in our millions, and it can be done. I'm saying we can flood this border if it's done strategically, if it's done properly, and over a period of time, we can make this happen. If we can, even in the time of what we're witnessing in today with the current war happening between Iran and Israel, I say we can put enough pressure to make the system of kuffar, the kufr system to crumble. On the ground, we can do it as locals, as those that have influence in your workplaces, in your place of businesses, and your political influences that you have. It's time that we do much more than what we're saying we can do, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Harun. Jazakallah khair. I know you've taken time out and you are talking to us from your phone as well. And I've got a few other guests as well who are waiting.
No problem.
Appreciate your time, and we will echo that call for people to take up action and put pressure on their politicians and wherever they are in South Africa. Jazakallah khair for your time,
Inshallah.
Harun. Appreciate
Shukran
it.
so much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Always a pleasure. Keep well. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Assalamu rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That was Harun Ori from the National Coordinator for Pagad, who's actually still in Egypt. We've got the other guests waiting backstage. I'm going to introduce our next guest, who is also currently in Egypt. Jared Sachs is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Joburg and has a PhD from the Columbia University. He's representing the South African Jews for a Free Palestine at the Global March to Gaza. Jared, evening and welcome from Egypt.
Greetings, Khalid. Nice to see you.
We've seen some of your social media posts, and you were updating people about developments as they were taking place while you guys were in between checkpoints and in Cairo and trying to get to Ismailia. At which point did you join up with the group? Was it right at the beginning, or did you meet up with them once they got to Egypt?
So what happened with me and with a few others who were on the same flight as me is we boarded the Air Egypt flight, and as we were taxiing out, the guy who assists the airplane to go out, he somehow smashed into the landing gear and messed it up. So we actually had to come back. They canceled the flight, and we were stuck in Joburg for an extra night. And then we were able to get on.
Was that maybe just an indicator of what was to come? Maybe just warming you guys up.
Some people thought maybe it was done on purpose because it's Air Egypt, but I probably not. But either way, it was a kind of a shock, considering that we were expecting stuff to happen once we got to Egypt, but we weren't kind of expecting it to happen before. And so we were delayed, and we got on the next flight. It was a Etihad flight through Abu Dhabi, and we eventually got to Cairo at, I think it was 6:00 in the morning on the 13th. So we were late, but we got there just in time to join everyone else. So we spent a few hours and then went straight to attend our first meeting in the town outside Cairo that we were going to. Yeah.
Okay. Did you face any issues at the airport when you guys arrived, or was that pretty much a normal basic entry into the country? Nothing serious?
Yeah, that's where it was actually quite normal. It seemed quite lucky for us. We thought we were gonna get stopped and interrogated and everything, but they were kind of just waved us through. There wasn't any problem. They were very inconsistent in the way they treated all the people coming into the country. Some people were stopped, some people weren't. There wasn't really a kind of rhyme or reason to it. It was almost as if they were trying to slow us down, but not stop us, so that they could say that they did let people in, that they didn't stop the march when they actually did.
Did you sense a feeling of uneasiness with the Egyptian authorities when they saw people coming in? Did you sense that they figured something was going on, or they knew about the march? Because obviously around that time, the Israeli minister had released a request, if I could call it that, to the Egyptian authorities not to allow the protesters in or anywhere near Rafah. Did you get any sense of this at all?
Not at the airport, but once we got outside the airport and we got near our hotel, there were police everywhere. The streets were full of police, lots of Egyptian equivalent of Caspers throughout all the streets. streets, and they were literally everywhere. It was quite scary, in fact. And then we tried to get into kind of the hotel that we had reserved, but we were obviously coming very late, and they wouldn't let us in, so we had to go find somewhere else to be. And we just tried to stay off the streets until we were going to our meeting point in Ismailia. And then when we got into the cab to go there, the two police officers stopped us as we were getting in the cab and kind of interrogated where we're going, made us wait, went and had a discussion probably on the radio or on the phone with someone, and they eventually let us go after finding out we were going to Ismailia, but they didn't. But it seemed like they recorded where we were going, and they used that intelligence as part of trying to block us at the roadblocks later on.
You had posted, I think it was a video from, I'm not sure if it was at the first or the second checkpoint. I remember seeing that from you on Instagram. Was that when you guys started facing issues? Because a lot of people were blocked off at the second checkpoint. Is that correct?
Yeah, most people were blocked at the second checkpoint. Some at the first, some at the third, and then some got through. At the second checkpoint, though, there were, almost 1,000 people there who had their passports taken away from them, and we were just kind of, standing around trying to figure out what was going on. We were not sure when we were going to get our passports back. We were not sure what they were going to do with us. And it was pretty calm most of the way through, but it's over time it kind of slowly escalated. They were trying to just kind of slowly scare us and try to get us to leave. And eventually, when we got our passports back, they kind of just gave us an ultimatum that we had to go back to Cairo, or we'd be assaulted. Essentially, they threatened to assault us.
So a lot of threats and a lot of intimidation tactics from the Egyptian security services. Yeah, which is normal. When I was there, it was a while ago. It was just after the second Intifada, and I had prayed Juma prayers at the Azhar Mosque. And immediately after that, the people all got up and started chanting about Palestine. And I noticed Egyptian security guys, probably similar to what you guys had seen. They're all in plain clothes, but they've got the earpieces going in. And they came in and literally yanked people out of the mosque. And this is what we saw in the videos that you guys had posted, in that they were dragging people onto the buses.
They did that. They also hired civilians, it would seem, people in civilian clothes, to come and just throw water bottles, pick people, grab people, push people around, in addition to the police and the army doing the thing. So it's kind of, sometimes the police and army can't be seen to be doing things, so they get other people to do it for them. They did the same thing during the revolution. It seems like the tactics are still employed.
Jared, you guys met up with activists from all over the world, and the representation, like Harun had just mentioned, everybody was there for one purpose, from all over the world. No skin color divisions, no religious divisions, no divisions, except for one purpose, and that is to try and get aid into Gaza to try and break the siege. Why is there need? Why do you think we've come to this point where citizens of the world have to stand up and make the journey from all across the world to come to Egypt to try and open a border so that people can get food? How have we gotten here?
Well, maybe just to clarify, I think while people weren't there in terms of skin color, it is worth noting that some people had money to be able to do this, and some people wanted to come, but just because of financial reasons they couldn't. And often color plays a role in finances, so that's just worth noting.
Sure.
I think that we had to do this because everything else we've been trying hasn't been achieving what we need to get done. Our protests, are good. The other actions that we've been doing are good. But the responses from our government and other governments is usually like, oh yeah, we support Palestine, but they don't actually do it. They don't actually do anything. They don't sanction Israel. They don't do what is necessary. South Africa could stop all the coal that they send to Israel, but they're still sending it, even though they're supposed to be supporting Palestine. So I think a lot of us felt that we just needed to do something else. We needed to try something new. This was an experiment, I guess, an experiment in taking ourselves to the site of of oppression, the site where everything is happening, and seeing if we can, change the narrative and make it more heighten, the awareness about what's going on.
Okay. Jared, I've got one more question, two questions actually for you. Briefly, obviously the work that the organization that you represent are doing is absolutely fabulous. We've got nothing but admiration and respect. We've got a very strong Zionist movement, although it's small in number in South Africa, but they're quite entrenched. What do we need to do? How can the viewers help in this regard? Because your voice is a powerful voice. It's a minority voice within a minority, which has kind of, a stranglehold on key positions in South Africa. What's your advice to the viewers? How can people assist?
Well, I think that's a hard thing to say. I think our role as SHAFP is to talk to other Jews, talk to people who, maybe have some concerns about what's going on, but haven't really voiced them or don't feel comfortable voicing them in a space where they would be targeted by Zionists, and talk to them and engage with them, and if they're on the fence, the more we can engage with them, the bigger the likelihood that they will kind of start coming around. And so that is our role. It's not your role. It's not other people's roles to do, unless they want to. Sometimes if they have friends who are Jewish and want to try and engage with them. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's something that you guys need to do. But I think in general, what you guys need to do is just keep doing what you're doing, keep supporting Palestine, and if the right people will come along, some people won't, and there's nothing we can do about it. If they're refusing to see what's going on, if they're refusing to challenge and think critically about the propaganda that they're being fed, there's not much we can do. But as SJFP, we try to, open the road for them so that if they do want to make that change.
Excellent. So for anybody watching and who might feel as though you need a safe space within which you need to speak, please reach out to our colleagues at the SA Jews for Free Palestine. It's a safe space. There's good guidance. There's excellent support. If your conscience is just not sitting right, and it shouldn't be after 19 months of genocide, then you do have a safe space. Please reach out. Jared, thank you so much. Stay safe in the remainder of your stay in Egypt, and let's connect when you guys get back.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Jared. Take care. Bye. That was Jared Sachs from South African Jews for Free Palestine, who've been doing excellent work. And their work needs to be supported, and their work needs to be amplified, especially from us on the outside, because they are speaking within their own communities, and they're doing excellent work in exposing and speaking up against the injustices that are being perpetrated by people who claim to have the same faith. Our next guest, our dear sister Umayya. Umayya is very heavily involved with lots of things for Palestine, community with a conscience, dedicated bunch of individuals. You'll find them in Pretoria on weekends. You'll find them on their days off. You'll find them engaging the public, doing the hard work, doing the hard hours on the streets, engaging people and explaining to people why you need to be able to say no to brands that are supporting the genocide. one-on-one conversations and some interesting discussions that they've had with people over time, and managed to educate people in the process. She's Umayya is also part of South African Friends for Palestine, and she was one of the individuals that Allah chose to make this journey. Umayya, assalamu alaikum, welcome.
Wa alaikum salam, Khalid. Thank you for having me.
Good to have
You're
you back.
100% correct. We do spend our weekends that way, talking to people, and we should definitely have another conversation about that. And yes, I am extremely lucky to have been one of the people who could take time off and have the finances to take this trip, along with 4 other companions who were all women, super amazing group. And, other than the purpose that we went for, which unfortunately was not achieved, we did strive to make our journey count. As Jared did allude to the hospitals that our group initiated, because we really didn't want to be there on a holiday. I actually didn't want to have anything to do with Egypt. I was on a complete boycott of all the Arab countries that are complicit, actually, and that actually aid the Zionist state. And I had no intention of going to Egypt, but this was something that I was willing to, and so were the other women, willing to be there in our numbers, as the previous speakers have said, because, if we have, 7-8 billion people in the world, at least we could have 5 or 10,000 people show up for Palestine in Egypt. And that was super amazing to see the different people from around the world. And while we didn't actually, I have to tell you the story, if there's time for it, about why we didn't join the South African delegation in Cairo, even though that was our intention. Jared did allude to it. So yes, at no fault of our own, in actual fact, in hindsight, it was complete divine intervention. I don't know if it was all the du'as, or wearing Ayatul Kursi jewelry, or what was going on, but the most unthinkable, ridiculous thing happened. How often does that happen, that the front wheel of a plane supposedly gets damaged during it being hauled out of its parking bay? Because, we were on time. Our flight was Wednesday night. We were on time at the airport, and we had friends and family to see us off. And we were super excited, all geared up with camping gear, because, we were
prepared.
I mean, I'm not a camper at all. I would more be a glamper, but I was set to rough it out. And we get on the plane, they shut the doors, the lights dim, and the plane starts to move. And the next thing, the lights are on. Yalla, yalla, out, take your bags, go back to the gate. And we all get up, look at each other. I was dozing off. And we're like, what is going on? And this is the first time I've experienced something like this, which is why I say it has to be some divine intervention, because it meant that we had to, early the next morning, reroute our flight. We stayed at the hotel at the airport because we didn't know what was going on. Was it a 2-hour delay? Was it a 6-hour delay? We didn't know. It turned out to be a 24-hour delay, because we had to then get rerouted through Qatar. And then we only landed in Cairo on the Friday at 12 noon, like 5 hours after the buses with the other delegates had left.
Already left.
So really, at no fault of our own, we were completely separated from the group.
So just if I can jump in there, at this point, did you already know, or did you get information about what was happening in Cairo, with some of the members being turned away, some of the members being deported, those who flew in, Moroccans who were deported, who were planning on joining the Sumud convoy? Did you get any of this news filtering in, or not yet?
So that whole Thursday that we spent at the airport trying to figure out what to do, we were getting all the news. Actually, something also super amazing is that we retreated to the namaz room in the airport. That's where we sat, because the hotel kicked us out and we needed to find somewhere to just relax until the flight departed at 8:30 or 9:30 or whatever it was. And we kept going around the group and asking each other, okay, how do you feel? What's your opinion? Should we do it? Shouldn't we do it? We made phone calls. We spoke to people. not in the South African delegation actually, but we spoke to other people who could give us some insight. And, we looked for signs all the time. There was actually a painting or a frame or whatever it was in the namaz room that was had something to do with Palestine, and we took that as a sign. You know what? We're going to do this. We already came this far. We've waited so long today in the airport. Yes, it wasn't pleasant, but you know what? We expect hardship, and this is what we're going to do. So we went ahead and we boarded the flight at night, and like I said, we arrived in Cairo way too late to join the buses. So here we were with nowhere to go. And then we discovered that the leader of the group had left Cairo. And while we were waiting for direction on what to do next, we were really in complete limbo. So we reached out to other groups. There was no contingency plan for people who were late. There was also a lot of secrecy. And this is just, I'm not slandering anyone or putting anyone down, but from our perspective, there was so much secrecy that we didn't know where we had to go. And this was interesting because now we figured we had to blend in as tourists. At the airport, getting into Cairo, we had absolutely no problems. In fact, the people at immigration couldn't have been nicer. They were actually joking with us, and it was super cool. And I think in many ways that's because we were late. So they didn't assume that we were there because we had actually missed the main groups who were already reaching the checkpoints. So we were booked in at the most dingiest of hotels because we were told to book within a certain area so that we could be on time for the bus the next morning or that Friday morning. So we kept the booking for the Friday night, and then we were hotel hopping, waiting again for direction. We found another hotel that assisted us to do a Nile cruise, and that's when the magic for us really started, because we got onto this boat and we started noticing that there were other people based on their accessories, their bags, based on what they were wearing, based on, just weird little signs that we could see that these people are part of other delegations. But we were told not to talk to anyone, not to say anything, because then, you don't know who's overhearing you and will alert the police. So we got onto the boat, and I noticed that there was a guy who was speaking Italian, and on the back of his T-shirt was a quote by Albert Einstein. And I know some Italian, so I could make out the quote about humanity, and we are like the oneness of humanity. And I said to my ladies, you know what? This guy's part of the delegation. And then we saw two other girls wearing keffiyehs on their heads. And the one lady in our group, Hasina, she went to stand next to this girl. And she, even though we were told not to bring any Palestine regalia on this trip, all of us, the rebels that we are, we did. We all packed in things that we could wear for Palestine. So on the boat, Hasina went to stand next to this woman, and she sort of flicked the Palestine color bracelets on her wrist so that the woman could look at them. And this woman looks at her, and she turns around and she hugs her, and she cries, like the kind of emotion we've never seen before. And
so this is that connection. This is that connection with delegates from around the world. If I can briefly ask you on that meeting activists from around the world, you obviously met somebody here, and then as as the day progressed or the next day, you guys met up with other activists as well from different parts of the world. What's that like? What was that sense like? Because the activism in South Africa has taken place within a certain space where we live. What was that like, seeing people from all parts of the world in front of you, and you guys are all there for the same purpose? How did that feel?
So, joining up with like-minded people was absolutely wonderful. People who are completely on the same page, who feel the heartbreak and the tragedy of the Palestinians to the very core of their being. And that is how we feel. And we were able to, after the boat cruise, after taking pictures with them and talking about their experiences, because they did make it to checkpoints, and they were telling us things that we missed out on. And that, in a way, it was heartwarming, but it was also very heartbreaking because we wanted to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. They were telling us how the soldiers at the borders were actually crying. She
we
showed
saw
us
videos of that. We shared videos of those.
Yeah. We saw pictures of, she was telling us that the Bedouins were actually assaulting them, throwing things at them. And why would they do that? Were they paid by
Those
the government?
videos went viral. Yeah.
So all of these little experiences that they've had, and the fact that they couldn't proceed further, was truly heartbreaking, and for us, obviously, as well. The interesting thing that came out of meeting them, we met an elderly Palestinian man who lives in France, and he was there with his son. So they were doing the father-son march as part of the French delegation, and here's where the difference came in with us and how our delegation was run in them. The other delegations had like 300, 400, even 600 people in them. The South African delegation was probably one of the smallest with like 50 something people, because unfortunately we seem to have had deadlines put on us. And according to meetings that we've had with Chief Mandla Mandela, this is actually an initiative of his. It came out that actually there weren't supposed to be those kind of deadlines. So where did they come from? Because it kept a lot of people from actually joining, which was quite sad. And I wish that was done differently. This the Palestinian man from Paris was telling me that they actually knew exactly where they were going to be at every point in the journey. And if we knew that, it would have been fantastic, because then we could have, when we arrived late in Egypt, we could have gotten an Uber to take us to the rest of the group, and we could have joined up with them. But again,
so I suppose these are teething problems, because everybody's done this for the first time. I suppose there wasn't a blueprint, like you say, there wasn't a contingency for in case somebody does come in late or nobody factored in, the fact that a plane is going to be delayed because of a faulty wheel, those types of things. So,
but again, there needs to be more transparency. So I will say that if this is done in future, we need to learn from this. I would definitely do it again. I'm not sure if I would do it as part of a delegation, because I think you can do it individually or with your own group. You don't have to be on a bus. In fact, I think being on buses and having camping bags and not looking like a regular tourist is actually what gets you into trouble, because you should try to be a normal person, a normal tourist.
And I suppose, these conversations you would have on your discussion group for all the delegates that have come back. I just want to shift slightly, if I can, to the objective of the Global March to Gaza, which is the people in Gaza, which is why you guys all made the journey, and which is why lots of other people would have loved to join, but they couldn't. In your overall estimate, what was the impact of the Global March to Gaza, which was coming off the heels of the Freedom Flotilla and the 12 who were taken hostage by Israel, in addition to the Sumud convoy that had started from Tunisia and which was making its way all the way through, made it all the way through Libya. Amazing scenes we were seeing from what was happening until they were stopped by Haftar's forces in eastern Libya. What's your takeaway from this in terms of the overall awareness? There's a reality in people's minds that we might not actually break the siege, but we're going to go there and try our level best. What's your overall impression of what this has done regarding the awareness around the siege on Gaza?
Honestly, I don't know. I think that, sure, it has raised some awareness. I think it has taken the cloak off Egypt's so-called support, because it has really shown them up for what they are. But saying that, the Egyptian government is completely disconnected from the ordinary Egyptian. Based on our experiences, we were looking for trouble, actually. Like, we were trying to challenge security. So we went to the pyramids wearing all our Palestine gear, going through security. The security guard took my scarf and folded it up and said, put it in your bag. But he smiled at me. So I was like, okay, I don't think he's all that serious. I think he's just doing this because it's his job. And I put my scarf back on the minute I was next. And then one of the other ladies in our group actually asked him, but why? I love Palestine. Don't you love Palestine? And she gave it to him right back, And he also smiled at her and he's like, okay, go. And that's how we ended up doing a touristy thing, but I cannot tell you the number of people who stopped us to talk about Palestine, the number of people who stopped to thank us for standing up for Palestine. And that was wonderful. But, you know,
this is something important that I don't think is emphasized enough. We know the position of the Egyptian regime. And I make the point of letting people know and reminding people the position of the Egyptian people, the vast majority of Egyptian people versus the position of the regime are complete opposites, because the majority of the people in Egypt, except those who have ties to government, everybody is in support of their brothers and sisters in Palestine. But they're just a suppressed nation because they're under an iron fist with the Sisi regime.
Well, every time we saw a Palestine flag, we'd go, oh, there's a Palestine flag on that shop, or there's one on that car or that motorbike. And we would be in our taxis and we would drop a hint to the driver. We'd talk amongst ourselves about Palestine. And then the next thing you know, the taxi driver is playing Palestine songs and we're all singing along. And it's, you know, so really the government is so disconnected, so disconnected. And we did make it, we had a meeting with Chief Mandla Mandela, and we thought we'd stay in South Africa until tomorrow, because they were going to have a Youth Day event at the South African Embassy. Unfortunately, I think because everything going on currently with Iran and Israel, they decided to cancel that event, and so we really had no reason to stay longer. But we did meet up at the South African Embassy also by chance with someone else. And that's how we decided, you know, we're going to make the most of this trip. And we visited the Palestine Red Crescent Society. And amongst us, we invited other comrades to join us. They did. It was absolutely amazing, you know, extremely heartbreaking patient accounts. A man who lost his literally entire family, his mother, his wife, his 4 children, his sister, and the frame of his family is behind his bed on the wall. And Jared actually mentioned it, you know, his legs, I mean, you lose everything, you lose your home, you lose your ability to walk, you have absolutely nothing, but this person is still completely steadfast in his faith. It's something that I think everyone who was there, you just, like, it take, you know, we're all crying, but this man is so positive and fully accepting of his fate and his family's fate. And that's what makes the Palestinians so amazing. But all of us clubbed together, we all put in as much money as from our spending money, and some people pledged actually to donate because they didn't have cash on them. But I feel like that's a way to definitely help, because there are 120,000 Palestinian patients or Palestinians in Egypt. And I recall her saying something, the lady of the Palestine Red Crescent Society, saying something like, it takes, if I had to do the conversion, it was each person needs $8 a day.
Okay.
So, you know, this is something that each and every one of us...
Those are for daily expenses, are they? Or are those for medical expenses?
I'm not sure. She just mentioned a certain amount that each person requires, and that is something we can definitely assist with, no matter where we are in the world. So if anyone is also looking for banking details, I'm not sure how to share those, but I can. Yeah.
Sure. What we'll do is we'll pop your details into the organization details in the YouTube description below, and people want to get in touch, they can reach out directly to Community with a Conscience and with yourself. I think on that last point, that's a perfect point to kind of depart on, is a lesson for us all in the faith of the people of Palestine, which you've just mentioned, with somebody who's lost his limbs, in addition to everybody that he knows and that he loves, and yet he's remained steadfast. How much do we take for granted, you know, in where we are? What are the things we complain about? It honestly, it pales in comparison. It pales in comparison. So,
can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
You know,
sure.
If you can't come to Egypt, the least you can do is come to Soweto. So on Saturday, people, it's early. There's really no excuse. If you can, please try to be there. And Community with a Conscience will be talking to our our ordinary South Africans about the importance of boycotting. So, it's not enough to just also be boycotting yourself. You should try to educate other people, because I promise you, the ordinary South African does not even know about the genocide. And that's really sad.
And just what Umayya is referring to is the first ever Soweto March in support of Palestine that will be taking place this Saturday. It's hosted by Salam Media. A number of organizations are assisting there. And the guest of honor is Bilal Khalid, who is a photojournalist, a graffiti artist. He's working with Al Jazeera as well. There's a number of programs that they've lined up with Salam Media. So please come out to Soweto in your numbers on Saturday morning and Saturday evening. There's a program for the public at Lakewood Conference Center in Johannesburg. That's also available to everybody in the public. Umayya, I want to thank you for your time, and on behalf of everybody at the team, for your guys' efforts, and everybody else who's accompanied the delegation to Egypt. I'm sure you've come back and there's a lot to discuss. There's a lot to want to do. We've come back, inshallah, with a renewed sense of conviction, and we've seen and met people firsthand who have managed to somehow escape that brutality that we can't even begin to imagine. So, Jazakallah khair for your time, Umayya. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Khalid. Thank you for talking about this, because it was necessary.
Go well. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. That was Umayya Teba, representative of Community with a Conscience. For people in the Pretoria area, you'll find Umayya and the ladies from the team on regular, sacrificing their time on weekends, where we could be doing things which are kind of more casual, more leisurely. The ladies are out in numbers, and they're out educating people about why you should be boycotting, the different brands you should be boycotting, talking to people, engaging and explaining, which is something very important. And she made an important point, which I just want to echo. In addition to boycotting, that's not enough, but you've got to talk to people about why they should be boycotting. That's how we grow the movement. What I'm doing, I explain to somebody else why they should be doing that. And we need to be able to convince people that that is something that needs to be done. Because honestly, if 20 months on into a genocide, we're still having discussions about why we shouldn't be supporting certain brands, then I'm sorry, we've been living under a rock for the last 20 months. And our sloganeering for Palestine doesn't really mean much. Our last guest is having a few challenges to try and get on board, Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali. What I'm going to do in the meanwhile is we've recovered the interview with Bashira, which was done earlier today. I'm just going to get that up here for you. I'm joined by Bashira Suma. Bashira is a long-time activist for Palestine, and she was one of the South African activists and a country coordinator for the Global March to Gaza. And Bashira is joining us from Cape Town. Bashira, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam. Shukran for having me.
I'm sure it must have been a busy last 2 weeks, and then prior to that as well. When you initially, firstly, how did you initially hear about the Global March to Gaza, and what motivated you to join and to get involved?
So a comrade in the Netherlands, she's actually South African, but she lives in the Netherlands, and we connected over solidarity work last year. She informed me about it a couple of months ago. And as soon as I saw it, I knew it was something I wanted to do. At first, I didn't know if it was even real, because so many of us have been saying if we have the opportunity to try and go to Gaza or to march close by, we would jump at the opportunity. So as soon as I found out that it was a legitimate cause, I opted into it. What motivated me to go? I think with many people who have been watching the genocide for the past just under 2 years, and for many people who have been in the solidarity space for the liberation of Palestine and other oppressed nations, I think it just felt like we've been doing the same thing over and over for the past 2 years. And, we've been lobbying governments, we've been protesting, we've been boycotting, we've been doing everything in our power as citizens. And the governments and international institutions just haven't been taking it seriously and haven't been changing anything. it just felt like, we can't rely on them any longer. And this is an opportunity for people to take matters into their own hands and take a stand and show governments and international institutions that, we are willing to do what we can, and we're willing to put ourselves on the line if it means that we can put all of this to an end.
Now, obviously, it's that comes from a sense of frustration in terms of calling on those in positions of power to be able to exercise their responsibility over people around the world who need it most. And I think every single person, every single activist or non-activist, everybody who's been watching the genocide unfold has had the same feeling of wanting to be able to do more. So this call came about, I think it started surfacing maybe a couple of months, probably after Ramadan, when I saw the first communications about this. And it was an ideal opportunity, of course, but I'm sure there was a lot that needed to be done in the background, because you're swimming upstream here. You don't have the support of authorities and of government. So in terms of an organizational perspective, because you led from the front on the South African delegation, I'm sure you must have had your work cut out.
Yes, I mean, it's been an intense 2 months. As much as we only left for Cairo last week, the month leading up to that, like, I had really little sleep, obviously trying to put things in place. We had to set things up in terms of safety, security, legal support, liaising with the government, putting everything into place. That was all on the country coordinators, as much as the global organizers set everything up in Egypt. It was our responsibility to liaise with our embassies and DIRCO and all of those things. So yeah, it's there was a lot leading up to this, and obviously there was a lot at stake, and we also had to keep our people safe as a priority. So yeah, a lot went into it.
When you guys got to Egypt, what did you sense the mood like from the Egyptian authorities to the traveling party that you were with? What was was there palpable feeling in the air that you got? I'm sure the Egyptian authorities were extremely uncomfortable, because in the week leading up to the Global March to Gaza, there was the communication order, rather, that was issued from Israel to Egypt to stop the protesters at any costs. So
Yes.
What was the feeling when you guys got there?
Look, when we left South Africa, there was nothing in the news about anyone being detained or anything. But I was on the flight with the first set of South Africans to get to Cairo. There were about 20 of us on our flight. And just as we landed and I switched on my phone, I saw news coming of people getting detained. So obviously, we were aware that, okay, it's starting now. And as we exited through passport control, 7 of our members did get detained at that point. So as soon as we got there, it was tense. We were being surveilled. We were being interrogated at our hotels. So it all started as soon as we landed.
So the members that got detained were from the traveling group that you were with?
Yes.
Okay, so that must have caught you guys aback, considering that the organizers of the Global March to Gaza had clearly stated all the documentation, all the paperwork, all the requirements that were requested by the Egyptian authorities, those were all fulfilled.
Yes, 100%. And I mean, those who got detained, the authorities couldn't give a reason for the detention. When our embassy and our consulate got in touch with the authorities, they couldn't give them any reason as to why they were holding the South Africans, and there were also Greek and Spanish people being held as well. Our embassy put a lot of pressure on them, and so eventually, a few hours later, they were let back into Cairo because they had no right to keep them detained.
So commendations to the South African embassy for stepping in here to assist with its foreign nationals. Had that not happened, as in the case of some of the other delegates who arrived from other countries, we know they were detained for longer, because those were the
They were also
reports
deported. Yes, deported because they might not have gotten sufficient support from the embassy.
It's terrible. So between you guys arriving, and then obviously you were meant to spend a day or two before everybody proceeded to Arish, and then from there the plan was to march to Rafah. What had transpired in that period, and were you guys able to get to the destination?
So yeah, we arrived on very early in the morning on the 12th. We were supposed to depart for Al Arish about 26 hours later on the morning of the 13th. And during that time, police and intelligence services stormed our hotels, not just South Africa's hotel, but other countries as well. The information was obviously leaked. They started interrogating our people, searching our phones, straight out asking us, are you planning to march to Rafah? Because if you are, you will get arrested. And at this point, we hadn't received a permit, but we also hadn't received a no or a warning. So it was just purely intimidation and scare tactics being used. So yeah, that was happening throughout the 24 hours in between us getting there and us leaving for the march. Because of that, we couldn't leave in buses from hotels because our hotels were all surrounded by police and surveillance. And that's when we decided we'd all make our way to the meeting point on the way to Al Arish, an hour out of Cairo, called Ismailia. And it's towards that point when we all traveled in small groups of 2 to 4 that we got trapped at checkpoints by our passports being confiscated, and we were forced into a large gathering where the police made it look like we gathered to protest when in fact we hadn't.
Okay, and we all, we saw the footage of how that turned out when people were basically dragged onto buses and sent back to Cairo. Bashira, tell me, obviously the objective here, this was an amazing effort by all the volunteers alongside the Sumut convoy, which made its way across North Africa, alongside the flotilla that was the week before. The focus is on Gaza. The focus is on the genocide in Gaza. The focus is on the 3-month-long blockade, this absolutely brutal blockade by Israel. The objective was to try and break the siege. I'm sure in the back of everybody's minds there was the thought that this possibly won't happen, but we have to do this. What was in your mind? Was the objective achieved, or were there other objectives that were achieved through the action of all the volunteers and everybody who came together?
So our primary objective was to open up the humanitarian corridor, to open up the border to let aid in. Of course, we were also marching for the end of the siege, the end of the genocide, and the end of the occupation of Palestine. But it was our primary objective to get the border to open, to let aid in, because people are starving to death. And as much as the brutality has just increased over the past 2 years, the starvation is a more recent tactic which has been used and has been escalated over the past month or so. So that was our primary objective. Obviously, we didn't achieve that objective because, one, we didn't get to march to Rafah. 2, they haven't opened up the border for humanitarian aid. However, we don't see it as a failure. We were not naive in that we thought it was going to be easy to get to Rafah. We weren't naive in that we thought we were going to get all the way to Rafah. We did think we would make it further along the route, but we always anticipated that this was a possibility. We just, I guess, didn't expect that the government wouldn't give us a no, but then intercept us and detain us before even having legal reason to do so. So I don't perceive it as a failure. The organizers don't perceive it as a failure. We still managed to achieve, great coverage of 4,000 people coming from 80 different countries trying to lift the siege and to allow humanitarian aid back in. There were only 4,000 people on the ground, but there were many other thousands who didn't even make it into Cairo. And the fact that so many people from 80 countries around the world are willing to put themselves on the line to end this is a huge symbolic statement in of itself. This was never meant to be an 8-day event and then we were just going to part ways and stop. We knew that this one particular action wasn't going to achieve everything and it wasn't ever going to end the genocide or lift the siege. So this is just the start. We are planning for next. What that looks like, we'll strategize over the next couple of weeks. Most delegations have returned home. There are a few people left in Cairo, but we are already planning to mobilize as a global organization, consisting of thousands and thousands of people, not just those who made it to Cairo, but those who wanted to come, but didn't have the means. So by no way do we see it as a failure, even though we didn't manage to achieve our primary objectives. I think the message is we aren't going to stop until we do.
I think you've echoed the sentiments of many around the world, the messages of support, the messages of people wanting to join, but they couldn't for whatever reason from various countries. I mean, we were inundated with messages as well. That just goes to show that the grassroots movement is growing, and it's growing rapidly due to government's inaction over the last 2 years, and stretching further into the occupation, which is the ultimate goal, I would presume, for everybody, is to end the occupation. The ceasefire is something, the aid is something immediate, but ultimately the occupation needs to be dismantled. Bashira, last question before I let you go. What would your message be to the viewers, having gone through the experience you've been through in the last 2 months? Obviously, you're not new to the struggle for Palestine. You've been involved heavily for a long, long time. What's your message to people who might still be sitting on the sidelines, or who might not want to get involved for whatever reason? What's your message to them?
One, I would say, for those who have been following what's been happening over the past few days in Egypt, don't focus on the activists who were there. Don't focus on what happened to us. That was just a reflection of the normalization and the complicity of Egypt in the genocide on Gaza. It was also a reflection of the rejection of Palestinians' right to self-determination. We need to keep pushing forward. As an activist, this is just the nature of the job. You try to achieve something, you hit a brick wall. You carry on, you don't stop. We won't stop until Palestine is liberated and all other oppressed nations are liberated. If we don't see that in our lifetime, we won't stop until we die. And people need to carry that forward until liberation for the entire global south and for all oppressed people are achieved. It was so beautiful to see so many thousands of people from around the world who have committed their lives to this. And we know that there are so many more people out there who didn't manage to get there, who feel the exact same. And to anyone who still hasn't engaged in any action, we need all the numbers we can. The more numbers we have, the more significant change we can make, and the less likelihood that they can stop us next time. So yeah, we can't lose hope. We don't have the privilege of feeling sad or feeling defeated. It's not up to us. We need to do this for the Palestinians, regardless of what challenges we're faced with.
Bashira, Jazakallah khair. We'll add your socials to the description in the video below. So people watching this who want to get involved, please do. It takes a bit of effort from our side, but remember, the people that we are trying to help and the people that deserve our help are sacrificing so much more every day. Bashira, Jazakallah khair for your time. Really appreciate it.
Jazakallah. Thank you for having me.
That was Bashira Suma. That was the country coordinator for South Africa for the Global March to Gaza. And as we close off this live stream, unfortunately, Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali has connection issues because he's traveling, doing work for Palestine. He's on the road, and unfortunately, the area he's in has a power outage. So he would have liked to have joined the stream, but unfortunately, he's not. So he sends apologies from his end. You've heard all of the speakers. You've heard those who, I'm sure many of us would have liked to join the March to Gaza, but were prevented for whatever circumstances, were in front of us. Everybody couldn't go. This was one movement. Just to give an indication, this whole thing, the whole concept for the Global March to Gaza took place within the space of 2 to 3 months. It wasn't longer than that, where people mobilized. On our social media feed on Instagram at Social Intifada, I remember quite early on, it was even before, I think it was at the start of the year, where people in the comments were starting to suggest, why don't we mobilize and get people into Egypt to try and forcefully open the border so that the aid can get in. The point here being that initiatives can turn into something meaningful if we actually translate our words and our thoughts into action. So for all of us, my appeal and the appeal from Social Intifada to each and everyone watching is, please do a little more. Whatever you're doing is appreciated. Whatever you're doing has been noted and recognized, and inshallah your intention is between yourself and Allah. We can all do a little more. We need to take one step further. If we all do this collectively, that's a massive step we take together towards not just breaking the siege on Gaza, not just getting aid into Gaza, because the people, even though they desperately need the aid, and people need the food, and people need the medical supplies, because we can't even begin to imagine what Gaza looks like and what the people of Gaza are going through. That's the one most important critical need. The second is to get those bombs stopping from dropping on Gaza. And more importantly, is to end the occupation of Palestine. Until the occupation doesn't end, we are going to have these cycles from an ethno-supremacist Zionist entity which has captured governments, which has captured people of influence around the world, within the Western world and within the Muslim world. They haven't captured the media space, and this is why we're able to talk about this here. And that's something they've lost horribly, which is why you're seeing on the streets all around the world people rising up and coming together for initiatives like this, is because of the power of independent media, the power of social media. Make use of those, continue amplifying the voices of the people of Palestine. Do not stop talking about Palestine. But again, my appeal and our appeal is, please take an extra step forward and do one extra thing for Palestine. If everybody can sacrifice one luxury, I'm not asking you to sacrifice an essential, I'm asking you to sacrifice one luxury, whether it's boycotting, whether it's your time, any of those things. Get involved. The effort needs you. And inshallah, at the end of the day, this is for the greater benefit of our brothers and sisters, our mothers, our fathers, and our children in occupied Palestine. From the team at Social Intifada, Jazakallah khair for watching. Remember, please click on the subscribe link below, share the video with others, and we'll see you at the next program, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.